Week, we've been talking about the rising gun problem here in the city. There's been well over 800 shootings so far this year, which is an increase of almost 25% from the same time last year.
In fact, according to the NYPD, we've already had more shootings this year than all of 2019, which is pre-pandemic. Now, during all of this, though, legal gun sales are skyrocketing. So the question is simple. Why?
So here to help us understand is Dr. Garen Wintemute, who leads the Violence Prevention and Research Program over at the University of California, Davis. So, Doctor, thank you so much for being here.
Good morning.
Thanks for having me.
Let's get right into it, because legal gun purchasing like this, it seems unprecedented. Is that correct?
It is absolutely unprecedented. The surge in purchasing started in January of 2020, a year and a half ago. It continues unabated through the end of June, we have data for. There's been a 60% increase over expected levels in gun purchasing throughout that entire 18 months.
But here's where it gets scary. Your research shows that an increase in gun sales usually mirrors a similar increase in violent crime. So is that the case?
Yes. The question has always been, which way does the causal arrow, as we call it, point? Increases in crime drive gun purchasing, but it's also the case that increases in access to firearms are followed by increases in violence, whether we're talking about crime or suicide.
So I guess the question is why, right? So the number from your research shows that approximately the past year and a half, we've seen the purchase of millions more guns than expected based on the number of background checks. That's what the research shows. But why?
A bunch of reasons. So back to January 2020, a pandemic is looming and then it arrives, and people are afraid of social unrest and they buy guns. And then we shut down. Life changes. There's massive unemployment. The uncertainty grows. And then George Floyd's murder, the end of May, and other instances of police violence, lots of anger, an awakening to structural racism. There's a substantial increase in hate crime. Gun buying continues. And then in the fall, we enter a political season, which always increases guns. It's a contested election. This time, the gun control guy wins, which means maybe I should buy guns now because I won't be able to buy them next year. And we are off to the races. As you folks mentioned, last year, there was a 25 to 30% increase in homicide over 2019. And this year, nationwide, not just in New York, there's a 25 to 30% increase over 2020. We've never seen anything like it, and it's going to continue.
Now, I heard you list a few factors there with the race issues, the George Floyd situation. Is it true, though, that we're seeing more women and minorities buying legal guns now?
It is true. Colleagues have done some data that hasn't been published yet. I'm not allowed to talk about it in detail, but there has been a change in the demographics of gun purchasing. And there's been some really compelling, I think, stories in the media about people who are coming into gun stores saying, this goes against everything I believe in, but I'm a target. I need to purchase a firearm. And we're conducting a massive experiment. There are millions of excess firearms now in circulation, and we have no choice but to see what the impact of that increase is on violence in the United States.
By the way, I just want to point out again, these are legal gun sales that are booming, because we're talking about a lot of illegal guns that are on the streets of New York City. You know, what suggestions do you have then, since these are legal, in terms of curbing gun violence? So
I am very encouraged by the willingness of the Biden administration to talk about the conditions that engender violence. Unemployment, all the things that add up to not having a sense of the future. And they're putting their money where their mouth is. They are putting billions of dollars into violence intervention programs at the community level, into job training, into efforts to reduce unemployment, into basic income. We're going to need, if we're going to make longstanding change here, we're going to need that kind of intervention along with stepped up law enforcement approaches, which you covered earlier in the show.
But do you think enough is being done on both ends? You just mentioned some examples of what's being done to stop, say, the root cause, but on the other end, the results of it, is enough being done, I guess, to stop, I guess, the flow of guns? And granted, these are legal, but there are a lot that are illegal that are on the streets.
Right. So in addition, the administration is stepping up efforts to deter and interdict gun trafficking, the organized flow of guns into commerce. A number of us researchers are going to help guide that effort because science has a role to play here. So I think we're seeing emerging a balanced approach. You asked, is it enough? And the reason I laughed is it's never enough. We're going to need to do more, but at least we are trying a lot of things at the same time, which is really important.
Hey, Dr. Garen, thank you for your research and thanks for coming on to talk about it.
Yeah, we
Sure,
appreciate it.
a pleasure. Thanks for having me.